Love them or hate them, influencers are running headlong into game development. Lately, I've witnessed this really interesting trend where I've started to see more popular Twitch streamers and YouTube content creators getting involved in game development. Whether that's publishing or promoting, funding, or developing their own games, they are bringing more games into the market, and it's raising a lot of questions. Are they just using their platforms to leverage their audience's naivety and try to scam them out of a few extra dollars like we've seen in the past with other products? Are these games being made on the back of inflated egos where because of their popularity, they believe they know game development better than anybody else? Or are we witnessing the beginning of an incredible trend where those who are deeply attuned to the wants and needs of players are delivering on those wants and needs and making games specifically for them? Streamers and YouTube content creators have become a staple of the gaming industry over the years. At first, these folks just started out with guides and reviews and let's plays to the more varied experiences of entertainment that we have today. If you play games, you likely have a few people that you follow. Maybe it's for different reasons. Maybe you find them funny or entertaining, you enjoy their critical analysis, or you hope to improve your skills at a game by watching somebody else that's more skilled than you. Or you could be in that complete other camp of people that watch people because you hate them, which is really weird and you really probably should stop. That's not healthy. Regardless, this sector of the industry has grown year over year without stopping. In 2023, YouTube generated $31.5 billion in revenue, with roughly 18% of that coming from gaming-focused content. And Twitch reported earnings of $2.8 billion in 2022. Something that started out as players just wanting to share their thoughts and opinions in gameplay has now evolved into one of the most profitable ventures online, and only continues to grow as gaming has become the biggest wing of the entertainment industry, now outpacing both movies and music. As the popularity of streaming and YouTube content has increased, so has the role of these creators, as many of them have become the new wave of video game marketing, exerting more and more influence over the industry every year. A report in 2021 showed that gaming creators are 53% more likely to have loyalty in their audience capture over the rest of any other type of content. Advertisers see that loyalty and they want to capitalize on it, with Business Insider reporting that gaming influencer marketing has grown from $822 million in 2019 to $4.4 billion by 2022. And it makes sense why this industry is growing so fast. The price of games has increased and wages have tightened. Players are more cautious about their spending and would much rather hear about new games from a trusted source or watch someone else play a game with that they resonate so that they can make a smarter purchase. This has led to massive profits for many of these creators. So from my perspective, it would make a lot of sense that some of these creators one day are going to reach the point where they just want to cut out the middleman and promote the games that they make instead. And to be honest, I feel like this is more of a logical conclusion than anything else. I would imagine that a lot of other content creators and streamers and such probably dreamt of making games of their own one day, like I did. But for one reason or another, you just never found yourself down that path in life, and here you are doing this instead. And now they see the opportunity to do the one thing that they've always dreamed of doing, and they're taking that opportunity to do so. And it's smart of them to do it in the first place. You have to realize that in a lot of cases with a lot of these audiences, they find people that they like watching for whatever reason. Maybe they find them entertaining, maybe they just like them as a person, and as such they want to support whatever this person ends up doing, as long as it's something that obviously resonates with them. And if it's a game that they're making, then yeah, likely they're going to give it a shot. I mean, even thinking about it from my own perspective, there are a ton of creators that are out there that I wait for their take before I even give a game a shot in the first place, or at least I had to begin with. Now it's more based on my own opinion to try to cut that leash off more than anything else, but you get the point. And there's a lot of people that do that. So it makes sense for these guys to want to make games of their own because they're likely already going to have an audience, and that's a big hurdle to jump over. Two of the most recent examples that inspired this video is Asmongold with his publishing company Mad Mushroom, and the recent breakout success of Video Game Donkey's Big Mode, which is a publishing company that published Animal Well to both critical and player acclaim. Now, these aren't the first to take the plunge. Other creators have tested the waters with mobile games like PewDiePie, who released games like PewDiePie's Legend of the Brofist, Pixelings, and Tuber Simulator, accumulating millions of downloads, with Tuber Simulator being the most standout success at 28 million downloads across both iOS and Android. When you're one of, if not the most famous creator on the platform, regardless of whatever the game is, it's likely going to receive more attention than other games would. And when you've involved your community in the development of these games and advertised them frequently on your channel, you're likely to see some level of success because Content creators, by existing, have already overcome the largest hurdle for the vast majority of game developers that are out there, finding and capturing an audience. 2024's biggest hit so far, Palworld, was a great game, a great idea, built on the back of a common interest of creature collection games like Palworld and the continued success of survival games. However, even with a game that eventually reached 25 million players, it wasn't guaranteed to have an audience during its production, and ultimately they were having to rely on their marketing, word of mouth, and the quality of their game to be able to find the eyes of players. Similarly, in the same way that FromSoft, Blizzard, Capcom, and others have developed an audience through releasing games over the years, giving them a fandom to be able to position their games for and sell to, content creators have built up a following that allows them to be able to do the same without ever releasing a product into the market. This is the biggest hurdle for first-time game studios and indie developers, and that's the lack of affordability in trying to market their games and their ability to try to find an audience. Creators leveraging their platforms can easily sidestep this issue, as they often have a massive viewer and subscriber base to be able to market and position their games for. Now, keep in mind, subscriber and follower counts, while relevant, they're not the only metric that you'd use to measure the reach of any of these creators. Asmongold, as an example, has 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube. However, that doesn't reflect the returning viewers that often watch videos without ever subscribing. To put it plainly, the vast majority of viewers don't subscribe to channels they watch because, well, the algorithm is going to serve them that content regardless. As such, the reach of these creators is far beyond what common metrics show, and oftentimes are even greater than the reach of some of these biggest studios and publishers that are out in the market. All with the added benefit that they are more trusted because they don't represent big corporations, and have more credibility because many of these creators often air their own personal opinions about whatever more frequently out in the open. Already having an audience before you actually have a product is an incredibly powerful tool to have in the back of your pocket. And the funny thing is the vast majority of people that are underestimating the impact that influencers are having, the people that are actually consuming that content to begin with. But do you know who's not underestimating that? Advertisers. That's one of the reasons why many of these companies have been funneling so much money into influencer advertising, because, well, that's just the future of where marketing is going now. Recently in a video of mine, I talked about how I think communication is the new form of marketing, because the vast majority of people, myself included, don't want to have anything to do with ads or commercials or anything of the sort. Conventional marketing doesn't work the way that it used to anymore. Product placement, all those kind of things, all that stuff is out the window. Now what we want to do is we want to put a product to a face. We want to see somebody use something. We want a critical analysis from somebody that we trust before we buy something, because many of us are more cautious with our money. And that puts a lot of these streamers and content creators in a really advantageous position to be able to sell products of their own, because they already have that audience there. They've already built up that trust. They already have a reputation to withhold and upstand. And with that, well, more people are likely to be more interested in the things that they make. Now, I would imagine there are a few of you that are out there that are asking, who are they to make video games? Well, many creators talk and play games frequently. That doesn't mean that they have the insight to make a great game. Hell, many creators that are out there don't even know how games are made or understand the intricacies of their design. We often are incredibly opinionated about games, either for or against, but we don't understand the decisions that were made or how systems within a game were implemented in the first place. There is the potential that these influencer games could be nothing more than influencers' egos that are inflated by their popularity, leading them to believe that they understand games enough to direct teams or produce a game. However, while I think there is going to be some of that in the future, I think it's important to not overlook the unique perspective of content creators or their awareness of trends. When you play games for a living or talk about them frequently with an audience, you slowly learn how to better voice your opinions and refine your tastes. You quickly recognize things that you like and things that you don't like, but you have the added ability to be able to contrast those opinions against the broader canvas of an audience. As an example, I recently started playing Warframe for the first time. I lamented over the time gating restriction on the game's crafting system, where some items could take anywhere from 12 hours up to 3.5 days to craft. I had assumed immediately that everyone hated it. However, the more viewers I polled, the more people that I talked to, the more I found that this mechanic really didn't bother that many people. After playing the game longer, I realized that once you're in the thick of the game, you have so many things crafting that you're always putting something in and taking something out, and the time gating becomes less and less of an issue. Through those conversations, this allowed me in real time to refine that opinion from time gating is terrible to it's terrible for a new player, as new players want to have access to things quickly because they don't have the arsenal that many of these mid to late game players have access to. It's important to make that distinction because now I've turned something that was just a feeling into a well-positioned game design philosophy that players don't want to play a game that heavily restricts them out of the gate. However, players further into a game can use restrictions to organize their play. That evolution of thought and perspective is incredibly insightful when developing a game, as long as these influencers are using critical thinking and their audience's opinions appropriately. As an example, Dr. Disrespect owns a game studio called Midnight Society, who's making an extraction shooter called Dead Drop. Doc has extensive experience playing battle royales and extraction shooters. He has the added experience of working at Sledgehammer Games before he ever even became a streamer. As such, he has the unique ability to not only properly communicate his experience to a team, he has the added access to a massive audience whose tastes and opinions he can draw from at any moment, giving his studio the chance to make a game that suits player-specific needs rather than trying to appeal to a vague, broader audience that many of these studios that are out there have to do. Now, I want to be clear, I don't want people to think I'm glazing these creators or anything like that, because there is no guaranteed success here. We're not guaranteed to get a great game out of just about any content creator, Twitch streamer, influencer, or whoever's out there. What I'm saying is that they have the tools accessible to be able to make some really great games. Because just alone being able to have insightful criticism that you can canvas across an audience is way strong. That gives you the ability to really understand the wants and needs of players at a level that many of these big studios and publishers that are out there just don't have access to that kind of information. They get bombarded on message boards, forums, and things like that, but it's hard to distill that down to a common complaint or a poignant complaint. Maybe that's the way I want to say it. A distilled complaint that makes sense in game development or makes sense in game theory or whatever it might be. But with that said, keep in mind that these guys are people that are actually playing games, and that's really important. That's one of the biggest criticisms that we often have towards many of the biggest publishers and studios that are out there, is whether or not they even play games to begin with or play their own game for that matter. And that's something that you're able to hold these guys accountable for. Are you actually playing your game? I only saw you play it once as a promotional thing. I didn't see you play it after that. Well, you must not really like the game or think it's very good. There you go. So this gives the added benefit for consumers to be able to see things a little bit more transparently, but even more so, I think it's really important to keep in mind that a lot of content creators that are out there, well, they eat by a lot of these games. They know what trends are happening, when something's hot, when something's not, when to press the gas, when to take their foot off the gas, when to walk away entirely. And they often do, and you'll see exactly when it happens, and it's because they recognize that players' expectations aren't being met or players' interests are starting to go in a different direction. And being able to understand when and where that happens is probably the most powerful tool of all. From my perspective, one of the biggest weaknesses of today's gaming industry is the lack of affordability and accessibility of games on the market. Many of the biggest studios that are out there refuse to spend less than $250 million to make a game. They charge $70 for a base version and ignore the plight of consumers who want less monetization, smaller games, and cheaper games. A trend that I think is well illustrated by both Helldivers 2 and Palworld earlier this year, breaking sales records. While many of these creators have built their careers on the backs of major games, many of them are often critical of anti-consumer actions of many of the companies that are out there, like Sony trying to block Helldivers 2 from over 170 countries, the existence of loot boxes in games, or just the over-monetization of games that we've seen over the years. Now, while many of these creators are often hammering these points because, well, being critical of them brings them views, conversely, this means they know how palatable, fairly priced, and fairly monetized games mean to an audience of average consumers. And it seems like that sentiment is shared across many of the games that some of these influencers are trying to help bring to the market, and you're seeing a really heavy focus in indie development and ethical monetization. Asmongold's publishing company, Mad Mushroom, is set to help indie studios find their footing by offering to help publish their games and leverage their influencers to promote it. Moreover, recently Asmongold and OTK started Pixel Pitch, a show where oftentimes they have on small indie developers that are getting the opportunity to be able to pitch their game for much needed funding, while also having the opportunity to put their game in the faces of an audience and promote their game to hundreds of thousands of people for free. Looking at Donkey's publishing company, Big Mode, and their latest game, Animal Well, We've seen a very well-made game, a very unique game made by a single developer over 7 years, reach wide acclaim, hit the top 10 in Steam's top sellers, and only cost $30. Now, I want to be clear that none of this devalues the work these developers are putting in to make these games. However, it does go to show just how effective influencer marketing can be, how powerful these platforms are, and the capacity they have for positive change within the industry. Game development is time-consuming and oftentimes expensive. However, the most expensive thing for an indie developer is the cost to market their game, and influencers can do it with little cost to themselves. It's practically a Konami cheat code for game marketing and publishing. At the end of the day, these developers are spending less money on their marketing, losing less to the publisher, and capturing more profit on the game's sales. While at the exact same time, these influencers that are publishing or promoting these games are essentially doing what they would normally do any other day by going live or pressing record. It's the most cost-effective form of marketing, and it proves to be a major boon for both the influencers and the developers. To be honest with you, it makes a lot of sense why some of these influencers, content creators, streamers want to stand behind some of these indie titles because, well, it's kind of like game recognized game. They did the exact same thing at one point. They invested their personal time, their money, whatever, into something that they believed in. They took a risk on themselves, took a bet on themselves to try to make a dream come true, and here they are now with massive platforms and huge audiences, and they're looking at some of these indie devs that are working on games just the same way that they worked on content, and yeah, they're looking to support them in any way they can. And I think that there's something that's not only wholesome about that, but you can also see how many benefits there are on both sides. I mean, these publishers and studios are spending a heck of a lot less money on being able to promote their game, while also these streamers are being able to do it effectively, no different than what they would do any other day just by pressing record or turning on a camera more than anything else. But I think something else that we shouldn't overlook is that many creators that are out there, this is not the same for all of them, by the way, many of them don't care about their personal brand, but in a lot of cases, their personal brand is tied to everything else that they do. They don't want their businesses outside of their platform to reflect poorly on their platform and vice versa. They don't want to do something that is going to put those business units at risk. You know, as an example, if I were to make a video game company, or if I was to publish a game or make a game, it wouldn't make a lot of sense as somebody who's incredibly critical of over monetization in video games for me to try to make the next Diablo immortal or something like that. That would reflect poorly on me as a content creator because, well, it would make me sound like I was just making up my opinions more than anything else, or just trying to tell people what they want to hear. And then also at the same time, you wouldn't be able to trust the company either because, well, you can't trust the creator. So yeah, there's a level of honesty that comes along with this, or at least it should come along with this. I'm not saying you should expect it from all of them, but you probably should expect it from some. Now, while I think having an established audience, the ability to recognize trends, and the ease of marketing are incredible strengths that these influencers can bring to game publishing and game development, I don't think it's their biggest strength. I believe what makes well-intentioned influencers a deadly factor in today's game market is the ability to recognize what makes a game entertaining to watch, which oftentimes translates to how entertaining a game is to play. Now, while this isn't true for all games, it is true for most. Using battle royales as an example, as a creator, it's easy to recognize that players often watch for high skill play. However, what locks them in is the random nature of these games. As a viewer, you don't know what will happen, where it will happen, or when it will happen, how players will react to dropping into different areas, using a variety of different floor loot, or being ambushed by players at any given time. Something that directly translates from the viewing experience to the playing experience. Conversely, these popular creators are painfully aware of what sort of content kills viewership, giving them the ability to parse retention and perceive a weakness within a game's design, ultimately allowing them to use that information to reduce friction points in a game that they either produce or publish. The best way to think of this is that each streamer or content creator's audience is serving as a blind study. You play a game in front of them, you see how the viewership gains and then wanes, and then you make adjustments based on that feedback. You see what the audience says, you see how they react, and then you document what viewers often remember as the best moments, utilizing maybe another company's games or even your own game and checking the peaks and valleys of viewership to leverage that in your game development philosophy. You're getting both passive and active data collection, creating one of the most holistic game development experiences possible. Using asmongold as an example, anytime he plays Atomic Picnic, at the very end of his stream, he stops and he sits back and he talks to his audience and he asks them about, different things of just what they think about the game, what they would like to see in the game, what they'd like to not see in the game, things that they would change, things that they like about it, whatever it might be. He records that information and he hands that over to the developers to be able to improve the game going forward. And that's really difficult to do. Just recently, I brought this up in a video where I was talking about how Helldivers 2's community managers just completely folded at the worst possible moment they could. That's just because they weren't built to be able to take in that kind of feedback at that level. However, content creators, I mean, that's literally their job. That's just what they do every single day. 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people that are talking to them at one given moment, and they're able to parse that information, pick out, how people are feeling about what they're talking about or what they're doing, and then use that to be able to leverage their content in the direction it needs to go to keep it entertaining or to keep the viewers still watching. And that is just something, I'm going to be honest with you, that I don't think really very many companies in the entire gaming industry have the ability to do. If not any of them, actually, because the thing is that oftentimes they have the complete lack of ability to be able to discern what is useful information and what is not useful information, and how to distill that into a critical thought that makes sense for a game developer to improve their game. Most companies that are out there, by the time they can even get through the vast majority of information that's sent their way, well, nobody's really interested in playing their game anymore because it's just been too long. It took them too long to be able to take an idea, take a complaint, and then fix that complaint or get it through the different lines of communication they have within their company to be able to make something like that happen. But in this case, when it's an influencer that's the one that's disseminating this information, and on top of that, it's their company that they own that's publishing the game or making the game, well, it's pretty easy to be able to make that decision because you're only getting that information from one guy or girl or whoever. Doesn't really matter. But yeah, I think the content creators have the ability to make some incredible games if they want to. That's probably the most difficult part. I think there's going to be a little bit of the temptation of greed or something like that. I'm not really too sure. Like, the problem is that, like, these are people. You know what I mean? So you can try to describe what their abilities are and how they could put those abilities to good use, but at the end of the day, it really depends on the person, the people they're working with, the other people that work for them, and whether or not they can actually distill all this information, take their experience, and turn it into a good game. I think what Dunkey did was absolutely fantastic. What a game, what a first game to pick to publish. Absolutely fantastic. I've been having a blast playing Animal Well. And with that said, same thing goes Atomic Picnic. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to play it. Asmongold, if you ever watch this, make sure you send me a key. I'd like to give the game a shot. I'm a roguelite vet, so I'm all about that. But with that said, I'm not saying that we should trust any of these content creators in the games that they put out. At the end of the day, we should still do the same thing that we always do, which is wait for content creators' opinions on the games and reviews, and then watch them play it. But with that said, they have the tools to make some incredible games. And to be honest with you, I think the industry could use a little bit of a shakeup. So I'm looking forward to some of the games that these guys produce, and I hope you are too. Maybe I'll make a game of my own one day. We'll see. Anyway, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends. Thank you for sticking around this long. Make sure you follow me on Twitch, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.
Family, 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 family.